Welcome to the Vacation Rental Show, How We Grow. This is your essential playbook to grow and scale your vacation rental business. With advice and insights from the best in the biz, I'm your host, Lynell Gordon. Welcome to the Vacation Rental Show. I'm Lynell Gordon, your host, and I have with me Meredith Rumsey, who is an experienced leader in vacation rentals. She's been doing this for 8 years. She's been managing staff. She's basically been the right-hand man of an owner. And now, guys, this year she's branched out on her own and she's taken on a partner. She's a co-owner, but she is the operator here. Welcome to the show. I'm really excited to have you here, Meredith.
Thank you. I'm excited to chat also.
So we talked a little bit about, tell me, you guys do something unique. You're in Steamboat Springs, Colorado, right?
Yep.
And you do what's called mid-term rentals. Now, would you please let everybody know what the difference is between mid-term, long-term, short-term? What are we talking here?
Yeah, for sure. So kind of what we do short-term rentals is that is kind of the bread and butter as of this moment because the midterm rental space is still new and is growing and we're kind of a part of creating it here in Steamboat and kind of the surrounding areas. So what it is it's not a long-term rental in that it's a furnished house, all bills are paid by the owner. It's kind of basically a short-term rental model that is taken to 30 nights or more. So in Steamboat, we recently had a lot of zoning restrictions put in place, as I know a lot of people in the industry are dealing with. And so we have three zones, one where, short-term rentals are completely allowed, and then two others where they're restricted. So this 30-night space allows those people in the other zones to rent their homes because a lot of people bought these homes as vacation rental properties. They wanted to use them, but wanted to rent them some. And that door was kind of closed on them. So what we're able to do is not only help those people out, but rent to people that want to come stay for that 30 night or longer space. And there are a lot of people out there that want that. You see it in the other regions, you see it in the Southeast all the time. Florida has many properties that, all the snowbirds come for a month. It's just not as prevalent out here yet. There is the demand for it. So that's kind of what we're tapping into. And not only do we work with people who are second homeowners, but we work with locals. A lot of the locals here want to leave for 3 months. They're over the snow and they want to go overseas. They want to go somewhere warm. And so they want to rent their place out while they're gone and while it's our high season. So we work with a lot of them also.
So basically, you made lemonade out of some lemons there. So here's a question I have for you. So we do on the East Coast, we do things like we have minimum stays. And what if someone says, well, I want to rent it for 30 days, but I'm only going to come and stay 2 weeks? How does that work?
So that's their prerogative. We rate the lease for a month, and we actually work with a lot of people that do that. So in Steamboat, a lot of people on the Front Range. So when I say Front Range, it's, Denver, Fort Collins, Colorado Springs. Their kids will be on a ski team. And so they have to come up every single weekend to the mountains. And before they were renting a short term every weekend, cleaning up after they left, dragging all their stuff with them. So now a lot of them have the opportunity to just rent it for a month or two, and then they're able to leave their stuff and come back. So it's another benefit for the owners of this space is that it's not necessarily occupied all the time. So rent tends to be relatively low wear and tear on their home, which people are always really happy to hear.
So for all of those vacation rental general managers who've been
Mhm.
managing for years but never owned their own, tell me, what's the biggest difference you find? I mean, besides the fact you're responsible for payroll, that's a biggie. But besides
Mhm.
that, what's your biggest difference between running a company for someone else and running your own company here?
Figuring out the infrastructure, that the difference is I've got to put the pieces together to make a solid foundation, and I was never really privy to the beginning of that. And so I kind of came in once that had already been started. And so for me, this is a blank slate. And luckily, I had the background to know what pieces of the puzzle I needed. I just had to figure out which exact ones those were. I knew the categories, but I had to figure out, like with this tech stack piece of it, and how am I going to organize this in a way that makes sense to me and for me, sustainable growth is of the utmost importance. I worked for a buffalo company before, which is kind of a random background, but it was a grass-fed buffalo ranch here in Colorado. And, I kind of watched them grow too quickly. And it was something that I was able to learn from. And so in running this myself, everything I've done is I've probably grown potentially slower than I could be right now because I want to make sure that the service level remains the same no matter how big we get. So I'm putting the building blocks in place right now in order to make that happen.
So, what advice would you give to people who have worked in property management for many years? They've managed, but they're
Mhm.
looking to start their own company. What advice? I mean, did you fall into it? Did you decide this is something I want to do? Or how did you come into that?
So for me, it was just, I kind of hit my ceiling at the previous position and I knew I wanted more. I like change, I like evolution, and I needed something different in my life and I really wanted to finally grow something for myself. And luckily, I paired up and I was approached by my business partners who own a housekeeping company because that piece of it for me was such a can of worms and something that I was not necessarily ready to tackle on my own. And so for me, having that support, having that business partner and that person to bounce ideas off of, they were a few years in that business, but very successful. So they kind of had the startup business piece of it themselves and had gone through those growing pains. I had the vacation rental experience. So we kind of combined those two and were able to grow it together. I've been a big part of we use Vintory for owner acquisition and they do these mastermind groups. And I found those to be so helpful to just talk to other people in the industry in this growth. Because that's kind of something in the company that I worked for before that we didn't really do much connection with other companies, outreach, networking, that kind of stuff. And I found that for me to be absolutely paramount in getting this foundation in place. The one that I want is asking people who have done it before and who have gone through those growing pains. And I can take what they've learned and apply it to our situation. Maybe it's not perfect for us, but at least it's a step in the right direction. And I found people to be so helpful I'm just so thankful to those people that I have reached out to that have helped out.
So, if you were to look over your shoulder and look over the last year and see the mistakes you've made, what mistakes would you say advice would you give to people saying, don't do this, or definitely have to do this, or definitely don't do this?
Definitely don't switch PMS systems too quickly because that was what we did. And now I know that the truth with these PMS systems is that you're going to be unhappy with anyone that you get in some way, shape, or form. And that for us was so challenging because we did exhaustive research. One of my partners is an auditor, so she's unbelievably organized and detail oriented, and we have spreadsheets on everything. So we had this massive spreadsheet on every property management system out there. So we did the research, we found one, and we had what I would have looked at that point in time as two major issues with it. But now that we did more research, switched, put in endless, countless hours to switch that, went through headache after headache and switching it, I did realize that the grass was not greener. So I think I would have stuck with the first one and tried to kind of wait it out and figure out the other pieces of the tech stack that could have made it perfect for us.
That is a common thread, guys. I will tell you, there is no perfect PMS. There's not. My biggest beef with some of the PMSs is that they promise things that are coming down the line. So my biggest advice would be don't buy a system with features that are coming down the line. Buy a system that has the features that you can live with.
Yeah.
Because you're right.
Yeah.
You're all gonna have, they all have their own problems. All have their own issues. But you're right, the grass is rarely greener. Now there are times it is. When we
Yeah.
moved from a DOS-based system into a Windows-based system back then, the grass was totally greener. It really was.
Yeah.
Now, did we miss it for about 10 years until that other system finally got all the bells and whistles that the DOS system had? Yeah, it was painful.
Yeah.
And any kind of switch like that's painful. So what other types of things would you caution people to be careful of?
In terms of trying to think of some of the other things that have been sort of a big had it go pretty well. I think because I knew, I think that so many of the things that maybe I would caution other people against is things that I sort of had learned prior of like, this is what I learned a lot more of what I didn't want to do before starting this than necessarily what I did want to do. And we everything that we did was so well thought out and analyzed kind of before we made that decision that I would say I don't have another big one that was like a, something that we would have done differently from the beginning. Maybe I'll have something else to say in a month, but as of right now, I don't have another one.
Vacation rental managers utilize LiveRes and their powerful software that goes beyond the standard. LiveRes empowers you to operate your business the way you want, while offering you powerful support and access to a community of partners and experts to grow your vacation rental business. LiveRes' industry differentiator is software plus support, community, and service, with high converting websites included to get you started. Learn more at liveres.com.
What is the most favorite thing you have to say, that your most favorite thing about doing your own as opposed to working for someone else?
Being able to create the owner relationships and have the guest service level that is important to me because I come from a hospitality background. I was always in restaurants and sort of that no matter how bad your day was, you had to put on a happy face and you had to be that person, as frustrating as it was. There's nothing that makes me more irritated than going into a restaurant having a hostess who is just awful off the bat. I'm like, it's not that hard. Come on. You just have to put on a smile. I had to do it. I wasn't having good days, but and so what I really like is for me, building relationships are the absolute number one most important thing for me with business. And backing up what I sell in terms of the relationships that we will develop and the service that we will give. And so I'm able to do that now. I'm not being told, no, 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 bring on this new property, bring on that one, bring on this garbage owner, just so that we have another property, in our portfolio. I'm able to say, oh, I don't think it's a good fit.
He's not, he's not that bad. You know what? That's the
Yeah.
advice that advice has been given over and over to property managers. Don't take an owner that doesn't fit. You really should look at the owner and make sure that they fit what you do. So I understand what you're saying. I love the way you said that. That's so true. Now you came from a large company and now you have a small company. What are the challenges with the small company that you didn't see with the large?
Just trying to figure out prioritization and what is the next most important thing because I am the one answering the emails and responding to people on the OTAs and doing this stuff, but I also have to be working with the legalities of our contract and making sure that we get that in place before we send another one of them out. And so trying to think of, okay, what is my focus today and how do I not get distracted by those other little things that keep pinging in while I need to focus on something more important. So I think that that's been the challenge. And also the question of the how much money do you put towards growth versus how much money do you put towards infrastructure, and is it the cart or the horse? And so we've had to really figure that out in terms of being small as to what does a marketing budget look like? And, do we cut here so that we can really go strong with that marketing, or do we work more on the operations piece of it so that everything is super solid and then invest in the marketing so that the name gets out there? So I think being small, finding the balance of that's been a challenge for sure. And we luckily found a great marketing company that's a bit newer, and so they've really been willing to work with us. And because not only are we new, but what we're doing is new, and so
Yeah.
it's not exactly cut and dry and hand it to a marketing company that's done this a million times before. It's somebody that's willing to work with our budget and then somebody that's willing to say, okay, we have to help you figure out how to create this thing versus just working with the wheel that's always been there.
Let me ask you one more thing. I was thinking about the PMS that you were talking about, and especially because you did such great due diligence. Let me ask you this. The number one thing that you look for in a property management system, is it the accounting? Is that it? I mean, is that the most important thing that you need is to be able to account for your money?
So funny that you ask because my partner is an accountant and an auditor, so I kind of got the best of both worlds where they have a or I'm sorry, they have a housekeeping company and then she's an accountant by trade. Because
Wow.
that is there, if there were two things that I didn't want to touch with a 10-foot pole, I would say it was those two things. So that's why the partnership was so perfect. But for us, that was unbelievably important. So we had to her and I had to look at it too. And that for me, the operations piece of it was the most important because I needed this thing to work for our day to day. And I want to, be able to staff as lean as possible to
Right.
maximize our profit, but I need to be able to operate effectively and efficiently. She has the same thing with her accounting side of it, and she knows that so well that I think she asks a lot of questions that a lot of other people wouldn't ask. So luckily, we were able to find an accounting software that works with the PMS system. Because what we found is that there was not a single PMS system out there that we were able to that had accounting that could do what we wanted to do. And for us, transparency with owners was paramount. And we found out over time, like it was very hard to be transparent with a lot of these accounting systems. So we had to add on that extra piece of tech that works with our, it's called clearing. It's fabulous. And, they're younger, but they're going in the right direction, I would say.
So the larger PMSs, you were priced out of the market with them, is what you were
Yeah.
saying to start with off the bat. The ones that
Yeah.
had the built-in systems. Okay, fair enough. So I'm going to ask you to tell me your favorite vacation rental owner story or your favorite vacation rental guest story.
Favorite vacation rental owner? There are
Doesn't have
so
to be the
many.
favorite owner, just the favorite story about the owner. You can
Yeah,
tell
I'm
one
trying
about
to.
the owner that you were talking about at the very beginning. I'm interested in that story.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody else is listening, but what she said at the beginning, I know that that owner exists that you were talking about. The one
Well,
that you
yeah.
were
Okay.
like,
So
I
this.
don't want to take.
Okay. So this is definitely a good one. I was like, it takes a minute to like rewind through the hundreds of different stories. Say like, what's a good one? So this guy had ring camera systems, and at first he seemed like pretty OCD, but it's okay. That can be a good thing or a bad thing, but we're going to go with it's going to be a good thing. And so I get a call from one of his first guests, and they say, "Hey, I'm pretty laid back, but this is not okay. Owner has been talking to us over the ring camera system." Yeah, yeah. And that she was outside, and I believe she was smoking a cigarette or something like that outside, like doing in a totally legitimate spot to be doing outside. And it was like there's no smoking on our property. Also making comments about the people that were like in the hot tub and I had to, it was a new owner. It was a very large home. It was a great account. So I had to go up to Miss, or, obviously over the phone and say, hey, we can't really talk to guests over over the ring camera system. And he lost it on me. Like, who did I think I was? And blah, 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 and how difficult I was to deal with. And anyways, long story short, he ended up leaving the program. But it's like,
Wow.
yeah, yeah. But I just never in a million years would have thought that in starting a relationship with an owner, I'd have to like make a caveat of, oh yeah, and by the way, you can't talk to people over the
We
ring
had,
camera.
we had an owner that had a camera outside as well. They can be really problematic or they can be great. I have a
Yeah,
camera system in my in one of the rentals that I have, and I turn it off unless I'm there. If I'm there, then I keep it, if there's nobody there.
yeah.
Otherwise, it literally gets unplugged and nobody can get to it. The property management company has to go in and plug it back in. But we had an owner that came down to ask one of the guests out that he saw. So that,
On the camera.
yeah, yeah.
And I was just like, okay, that's not going to work for us. That's not going to work for us.
It's actually unacceptable
And it's illegal
possibly
in
illegal.
it's highly
Yeah,
illegal, I would think, in North Carolina. The way that it went about, I can tell you the way it went about was illegal.
yeah,
We had to nip that one in the bud and say that's not allowed. So
yeah.
I like your story. I can
Yeah.
relate to that story. I know that there are a lot of people out there that can relate to that story. Is there any other advice that you'd like to give new property managers who are owner operators? Anything specific you want to share before I go? Because I
I
want to give you opportunity to say whatever you want to say.
Yeah, for sure. I think trying to find your own niche somehow. And I think that it's so hard to do in an industry that's so saturated right now. There's so many property managers out there, and you go to the conference and kind of the message is the same from everybody. But what we wanted to do was we had to find some place within the industry that we could really make it our own. And even if, yeah, maybe if the market isn't quite as big as it is for the STRs, if you're the only one doing it, then you've got a market. You've got a market share. And so I think if you can find those little things, whether or not it's more of a focus on more of a travel agent style side of it, or, it's partnering up with somebody in town to offer something. I don't know. I think for us, that's been so important to really differentiate ourselves and make ourselves known at a young age in this. So I guess that would be my advice.
Well, that's great. Well, listen, I really appreciate you coming on and talking about your first year. I hope that you'll come back next year. And let's talk
Yeah.
about the challenges of year number 2, because I'm certain that you'll learn from this year. And I expect, based on your passion and love for this, you'll grow as well.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thanks for being with us, Meredith. And it's really been nice
Yeah.
to get to know you. That's awesome.
Yeah, you also. Thank you.
This episode of How We Grow is brought to you by LiveRes. To find out more about how LiveRes can help grow your vacation rental business, visit liveres.com. Make sure to search for How We Grow in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found, and hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. On behalf of the team here at Inhabit, thanks for listening.